What if I told you that the gardening techniques your local nursery never mentions? Techniques that were nearly banned, called wasteful, called dangerous, even called illegal by colonial agricultural authorities, are the exact same techniques that allowed Chinese farmers to feed dense populations for over 4,000 years in spaces smaller than your backyard. Today, we are counting down 25 of those techniques. From number 25 all the way to the absolute most powerful method at number 1, each one is going to change how you think about growing food forever. Stay until the end because number 1 is the method that made Western agricultural scientists genuinely uncomfortable when they first studied it. Number 25. The bamboo humidity tent. In Chinese kitchen gardens, particularly in drier northern regions like Shaanxi and Gansu, gardeners take flexible young bamboo shoots and arch them over seedling beds, then drape old cloth or lightweight fabric across them, creating a low tunnel. This is not just a frost protector. The real genius is that at night, the fabric traps outgoing radiation heat from the soil, and in the morning before removing it, the condensation that builds on the inside of the cloth drips back onto the seedlings like a light irrigation. You are essentially recycling atmospheric moisture back into your plants. Do this by cutting green bamboo lengths of about 4 feet, pushing each end about 4 inches into the soil, roughly 2 feet apart, creating arch ribs every 18 inches along your bed. Cover with lightweight cotton cloth and secure edges with stones. Remove during daytime hours for sun exposure. This extends your growing season by 4 to 6 weeks on both ends of the calendar without spending anything. Number 24. 3-layer vertical wall planting. Chinese gardeners in densely populated areas like old Shanghai neighborhoods have long used south-facing walls as growing surfaces with 3 distinct planting zones. At the base, they grow shade-tolerant crops like ginger and water spinach. At mid-height on trellises attached to the wall, they grow climbing beans or bitter melon. At the very top, where heat radiates most intensely off the masonry, they train sun-loving crops like loofah and winter squash. To replicate this, install horizontal bamboo poles across your wall at 18-inch intervals using wire ties. Plant each zone with crops matched to the light and temperature gradient of that specific height. One south-facing wall of 6 feet by 8 feet can functionally produce the output of roughly 40 square feet of horizontal ground. The wall itself acts as a thermal mass, absorbing daytime heat and releasing it at night, which protects tender crops. Number 23. Rice water fermentation feed. Every time rice is washed in a Chinese household, that cloudy, starchy water is never thrown away. It is collected and left to ferment at room temperature for 2 to 3 days until it develops a mildly sour smell, then diluted 50% with fresh water and poured around vegetable roots. The fermentation process allows beneficial bacteria and yeasts to break down the residual starch and proteins into forms plants can absorb almost immediately. It also introduces beneficial microbes into your soil food web. Start collecting rice wash water in a lidded container. Allow it to sit in a warm spot for 48 to 72 hours and use within a week. Apply at the base of plants 2 to 3 times weekly. Plants fed this way consistently show darker green coloration and faster establishment. Number 22. The buried clay pot slow-release irrigation, called the porous clay vessel method and used throughout southern China. This technique involves burying an unglazed clay pot or broken terracotta container with a small hole in its base directly in the planting bed, filling it with water and covering the top with a flat stone or tile. Water seeps through the porous walls and the hole slowly and directly into the root zone over 12 to 24 hours. This wastes almost zero water to evaporation, delivers moisture exactly where roots need it, and keeps leaf surfaces dry, which dramatically reduces fungal disease. Bury the pot so its rim sits just above soil level. Fill it every morning. One medium clay pot can serve a 4 square foot planting area. This technique is still used today in Yunnan province where water conservation is critical. Number 21. Companion planting. Using the Chinese 5-element theory as a crop rotation guide. Traditional Chinese gardeners in regions like Sichuan categorized vegetables by their energetic properties aligned to 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, which corresponded to plant families and their soil interactions. Practically speaking, this means never following alliums with alliums, never following heavy nitrogen feeders like corn with other heavy feeders, and always following root vegetables with leafy vegetables. The actionable version is to rotate in this sequence. Legumes first to fix nitrogen, then leafy greens to consume that nitrogen, then fruiting crops like tomatoes and peppers, then root crops, then a fallow period planted with green manure. This rotation prevents soil depletion, breaks pest cycles, and mimics the system used in Chinese kitchen gardens for generations. Number 20. Taro leaf funnel irrigation. In humid subtropical regions of southern China, including Guangdong and Fujian, large taro leaves are deliberately positioned above smaller plants during dry periods. The broad hydrophobic surface of the taro leaf channels even light rainfall or morning dew toward the stem of the taro plant itself and in turn towards its neighbors. Gardeners amplify this effect by propping harvested taro or elephant ear leaves on sticks angled at roughly 45 degrees above sensitive seedlings, directing any available moisture toward a specific target plant. Try this with any large leaf plant material during dry spells by creating a natural funnel. A single large taro leaf can direct enough dew on a humid night to give a small seedling its full daily water requirement. Number 19. The ash and char soil amendment method. Before modern soil testing, Chinese gardeners in the Yangtze River Delta region used wood ash from cooking fires and charred rice hulls in precise combination with their soil. Wood ash raises soil pH and provides potassium and calcium. Charred rice hulls, which closely resemble biochar, create porous structures that hold water and nutrients and support fungal networks. The correct ratio is roughly 1 part ash to 3 parts charred hull material, worked into the top 4 inches of soil before planting. Never apply ash and fresh manure simultaneously as they chemically react and release nitrogen as ammonia gas, losing its value. Apply ash in fall, manure in spring. This combination is why certain plots in China have been farmed continuously for hundreds of years without losing fertility. Number 18. Soybean green manure chopping technique. In northern Chinese gardens, soybeans are grown not just for food but deliberately as a soil rebuilding crop. When the plants reach about 18 inches tall, before they flower, gardeners cut them at the base with a quick chop and lay them directly on the soil surface. Then use a hoe to chop the green material into small segments and lightly till it into the top few inches. This is not composting. This is direct green manuring where fresh nitrogen-rich material decomposes in place within 2 to 3 weeks, releasing nutrients directly to whatever is planted afterward. The key is the timing. Chopping before flowering means the plant has not yet drawn nitrogen back into its seeds, so all of it stays in the leaves and stems where your soil can access it immediately. Number 17. Sunken bed, microclimate engineering. In windy, arid regions of northwestern China, including parts of Gansu and Ningxia, traditional gardeners dig planting beds that sit 6 to 8 inches below the surrounding ground level, rather than building raised beds up. This is counterintuitive to Western gardeners raised on the raised bed gospel. The logic is powerful. Sunken beds collect any rainfall that falls nearby, are protected from desiccating winds by the raised edges, maintain more consistent soil temperature, and create a sheltered microclimate where humidity stays higher. Dig your bed down, mound the excavated soil into a low border around the perimeter, and plant into the recessed center. In hot, dry climates, this single technique can double the survival rate of seedlings through their critical establishment weeks. Number 16. The living mulch strategy using sweet potato vines. Across southern Chinese vegetable plots, sweet potato plants are grown not primarily for their tubers, but as a ground cover mulch underneath taller crops like corn, taro, and pole beans. The dense vining growth of sweet potato leaves covers bare soil completely, preventing moisture evaporation, suppressing weeds without any labor, and fixing the visual appearance of productive ground that might otherwise look empty. Plant sweet potato slips in the gaps between taller crops once those crops reach about a foot in height. The sweet potato will carpet the ground within 3 weeks. In autumn, you also harvest actual sweet potatoes as a bonus crop from the same space. You are growing 2 crops simultaneously in the same square footage. Number 15. Fermented fish scraps fertilizer. In coastal and river communities throughout China, fish heads, bones, entrails, and scales are collected and buried directly in the garden beds in autumn, 6 to 8 inches deep and at least a foot away from plant stems to avoid burn. By spring, complete decomposition has occurred and the bed is extraordinarily fertile with phosphorus, calcium from the bones, and trace minerals from the scales. The trick is depth and timing. Too shallow and the smell attracts animals. Too close to planting season and ammonia from decomposition can damage roots. Coastal Chinese gardeners have used this practice for well over 1,000 years. If you have access to fish processing waste, this is arguably the most nutrient-dense free fertilizer available to any small-scale gardener. Number 14. The night soil composting chamber. This topic makes Westerners uncomfortable, but understanding it is important. For centuries across China, human waste was treated as an agricultural resource, carefully composted in two chamber systems where waste was transferred between chambers during decomposition cycles, with the final product applied only to soil before planting, never to crops directly. The key to the safety and effectiveness of the traditional system was the composting period of at minimum several months, combined with the introduction of plant material and ash to manage pathogens. Modern adaptations of this principle using humanure composting protocols with properly verified thermal composting achieve the same complete pathogen elimination that Chinese farmers relied on to create the remarkably fertile soil that sustained dense agricultural populations. Number 13. Vertical root pruning to intensify root zone productivity. Traditional Chinese gardeners in Shanghai and surrounding areas who grew in extremely limited soil volumes discovered that periodically cutting the outer roots of established container and bed-planted vegetables with a sharp spade redirected the plant energy toward producing denser, more branched interior roots rather than wide-spreading roots that competed with neighbors. Insert a sharp, narrow spade 8 inches deep in a circle roughly 8 inches from the plant stem of established fruiting vegetables like eggplant and chili peppers once mid-season. This forces root regeneration and simultaneously stimulates the plant to produce more fruiting hormones in a stress response analogous to the controlled stress pruning used on fruit trees. Plants treated this way frequently produce a significant second fruiting flush late in the season. Number 12. The raised sleeping mound system for wet climates. In the waterlogged rice paddies in lowland areas of Jiangxi and Zhejiang provinces, vegetable gardeners create long, narrow growing mounds raised about 14 inches above the surrounding water table, oriented to run north to south to maximize sun exposure on both sides. Each mound is about 18 inches wide at the top with drainage channels running between mounds. Crops planted on the curved mound sides get dramatically improved drainage and aeration compared to flat bed planting, and the channels between mounds collect irrigation water that wicks upward through capillary action. You are combining excellent drainage at the root zone with reliable moisture access simultaneously. In any garden with drainage problems, building these narrow curved mounds transforms what would be unworkable waterlogged soil into highly productive planting space. Number 11. Succession planting using the lunar calendar. Chinese gardeners throughout history have used the traditional Chinese lunar calendar to time successive plantings of the same crop at intervals aligned with specific moon phases. The practical agricultural logic behind lunar planting is that the gravitational effects of the moon on soil moisture genuinely do influence germination rates and early root development. Specifically, planting root crops in the 2-day period approaching the new moon and planting leafy crops in the 2-day period approaching the full moon consistently produces measurable improvements in germination uniformity. Beyond the celestial timing, the lunar calendar also naturally enforces succession planting at roughly 14-day intervals, which is the ideal spacing for continuous harvest of salad greens, radishes, and cilantro without any single harvest overwhelming your eating capacity. Number 10. The hotbed seedling forcing method using fresh manure. Before any heated greenhouse existed, Chinese market gardeners in the colder north used fresh horse or pig manure packed into a pit 2 feet deep, topped with 4 inches of soil, to create a biologically heated seed-starting bed. Fresh manure in significant volume generates substantial heat during its initial decomposition phase, maintaining soil temperatures of 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 weeks, which is precisely the soil temperature most vegetable seeds need for rapid germination. Build a simple frame of boards or bricks around a 2-foot deep pit, pack it with fresh manure, top with quality soil. Plant your seeds. You can start crops 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date using nothing but biology to provide the warmth. This is how northern Chinese market gardeners had transplants ready weeks before their competitors. Number 9. Intensive inter-row cultivation using the hoe as a tool of aeration. In traditional Chinese agriculture, there's a concept that can be translated roughly as dry irrigation, the practice of hoeing between crop rows very shallowly, just 1 to 2 inches deep, after rain or irrigation. The purpose is not primarily weed control. By disturbing and aerating the soil surface crust that forms after watering, you dramatically reduce capillary water loss from evaporation. Research has confirmed that this shallow cultivation can reduce soil moisture loss by up to 30% compared to uncultivated soil. Chinese farmers who practice this twice weekly after watering events could stretch their available water supply dramatically in ways that made their gardens appear to require far less irrigation than they actually did. The secret was not more water. It was less evaporation. Number 8. The earthworm farming integration system. Long before Western permaculture formalized the concept, Chinese kitchen gardeners in Jiangsu province maintained dedicated earthworm cultivation beds adjacent to their vegetable plots. Kitchen scraps, leaf litter, and diluted rice water were fed to dense earthworm populations, and the resulting castings were scooped out and applied directly around vegetable roots at transplanting time and again at flowering. But the real cleverness is that they also periodically moved shovels full of the worm-rich bedding material directly into the vegetable beds, inoculating the entire soil food web rather than just adding a surface fertilizer. To replicate this, maintain a simple wooden bin of bedding material and kitchen scraps, harvest worm castings every 6 to 8 weeks, and transfer worm-rich sections of the bin into your growing beds seasonally. Number 7. Gray water collection and biological filtration using aquatic plants. In traditional Chinese village gardens, all household washing water was directed through a small pond or channel planted with water hyacinth cattails and aquatic mint before being used on vegetables. These aquatic plants strip excess soap residue, filter suspended particles, and absorb household chemical traces through their roots. The biologically filtered water that emerges after passing through this living filter is clean enough for vegetable irrigation without any risk to edible crops. Even a half-barrel or small container planted with water hyacinth and aquatic mint can filter gray water effectively over a 48-hour residence time. This system simultaneously creates a habitat for beneficial predatory insects and provides aquatic plant material for compost. Number 6. The trellis angle. Optimization for maximum fruit load. Traditional Chinese cucumber and bitter melon growers discovered empirically that training these vining crops on a trellis angled backward at roughly 75 degrees rather than straight vertical produced significantly heavier crops. The reason is that the lateral shoots, which are the primary fruiting wood on these crops, hang downward at a natural angle when the main vine is trained at a slight backward lean, which induces more flowering hormones than shoots trained strictly vertically or horizontally. Build your trellis so it leans slightly away from you at the top, anchored firmly at the base. Train the main vine up the lean and allow lateral shoots to hang. Chinese market gardeners growing bitter melon this way report dramatically increased fruit sets compared to vertical cultivation and easier harvesting because the fruit hangs visibly away from the foliage. Number 5. Deeply buried banana and taro waste composting directly in the bed. In the subtropical growing regions of Guangdong and Hainan, gardeners cut banana trunks and taro stalks, which are enormous accumulators of water and mineral nutrients, and bury them whole or in large chunks 2 feet below their planting beds, filling the trench back with soil. As these materials decompose over the following year, they create an underground reservoir of moisture and a slow-release nutrient source that literally feeds crops from below for an entire growing season without any surface applications. The sheer water content of banana trunk material means it also acts as a buried water storage body in a dry summer. Bury this material in autumn and plant heavy feeder crops like squash and cucumbers directly above the burial site the following spring. Number 4. The trap crop and harvest pest management system. Traditional Chinese gardeners planted small borders of extremely attractive pest crops specifically to lure insects away from their main vegetables. Mustard greens were planted at the perimeter of a plot to attract aphids and cabbage worms, and these border plants were then harvested entirely, pests and all, by cutting them and submerging them in buckets of water to drown the pests before composting the material. This is not passive companion planting. It is active pest harvesting. The trapped pests are removed from the garden ecosystem entirely rather than simply relocated. Plant a single row of mustard greens around your entire vegetable bed. When you see pest pressure building on this outer row, cut the entire row, drown it in a bucket for 24 hours, then compost. Repeat every 3 to 4 weeks throughout the growing season. Number 3. The living soil crust inoculation method. Here's the one that scientists are now studying seriously. In ancient Chinese gardening texts and in the practices still observed in older rural communities in Yunnan, experienced gardeners collected the dark biological soil crust, a thin living layer of beneficial fungi, bacteria, mosses, and microalgae found on undisturbed soil surfaces in nearby forests or field edges, and crumbled small amounts of it into their garden beds before planting. This biological crust contains extraordinarily diverse populations of mycorrhizal fungi and nitrogen-fixing bacteria that form the foundational layer of a healthy soil food web. To do this, find a patch of undisturbed dark biological crust on forest soil or old field edges. Collect a thin layer in a container, crumble it into your prepared beds at about 1 handful per square foot, water it in gently, and do not disturb the soil again for 2 weeks while these communities establish. This single act can transform biologically depleted soil into a functioning living ecosystem within a single growing season. Number 2. The 12-month crop calendar with deliberate microclimate stacking. The reason that small Chinese kitchen gardens produce food every single month of the year is not magic. It is disciplined use of every microclimate within a small space simultaneously. North-facing cool spots are used for cold-season crops like lettuce and spinach that bolt in heat. South-facing wall pockets are used for heat lovers during every warm period. Sheltered corners are used for tender crops that need frost protection. Exposed open ground is used for cold-hardy crops that benefit from free air movement. The complete 12-month production calendar is achieved by mapping every microclimate in your space and assigning crops that are matched to those specific conditions across all 4 seasons. Draw a simple map of your growing space, note the sun angle, shade patterns, and wind exposure in each area, and assign crops accordingly with no square foot left unplanted at any point in the year. And number 1, the 1,000-year-old deep channel fertility cycling system. This is the foundation of everything. In traditional Chinese paddy and vegetable farming, particularly in the Zhejiang and Jiangsu regions that sustained extraordinarily dense human populations for centuries, farmers maintained a continuous closed-loop fertility system that worked like this. Duckweed and aquatic plants grown in water channels between beds were harvested regularly and incorporated into vegetable beds as green manure. Ducks and fish living in those same channels ate insects and weeds that fell from the adjacent vegetable beds and converted them into manure deposited directly into the water. That nutrient-rich water was then used to irrigate the vegetable beds. The vegetable scraps and trimmings went back to feed the ducks. Nothing left the system. Everything cycled. You can create a simplified version of this using even a single large container of water planted with water plants and stocked with a few small fish or water snails alongside your vegetable beds. The water from your container irrigates your plants. Your plant trimmings feed the aquatic life. Their waste fertilizes future irrigations. This closed-loop thinking is why Chinese agricultural land remained productive for literally thousands of years, while other civilizations exhausted their soils and collapsed. It is not a trick. It is a philosophy. And once you start seeing your garden as a closed-loop system rather than a series of individual plants needing individual inputs, everything changes. That is when your tiny space starts feeding you like a farm.